There we go. And then if anybody else pops in, I will just admit them, but I'll go ahead and get started with tonight's workshop. So I want to
Yes, ma'am.
welcome you here tonight. I'm calling it From Hot Mess to Masterpiece. And so we're going to cover outlines and annotated bibliographies. If you are in LAN 100, if you're in LAN 101, and even to a certain extent, if you're in FAS 100, you will encounter outlines and or annotated bibliographies. So before we get started tonight with our agenda, I'm going to just open us up in a word of prayer. And then we'll jump into the work. So if you'll virtually bow your heads with me, I know, Rosanna, you probably can't do that, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and pray. Father God, we just thank you tonight for this chance to come together in this virtual space. I thank you for this opportunity to minister to these students, to encourage them along the way as they work through these courses that they're taking. Lord, I pray that you will bless our work tonight, bless the conversation, the information, and as always, may it be for your glory. We pray all these things in your name. Amen. Amen. All right, so I'm going to start tonight with, if my screen will cooperate, some objectives. So these are kind of our goals for tonight's session. The first goal is to understand effective outlining strategies. It's going to be very basic, very, short, sweet, and to the point. I will show you resources and references for other workshops that may be a little more detailed, should you so need it. But tonight, I'm kind of just the 101, right? Outlines and annotated bibliographies, the basics. So once we go through outlining strategies, then we will learn how to create annotated bibliographies. Before we start talking about outlines and annotated bibliographies, I'm just going to review essay structure because it's important before we get into a discussion of those items that we understand the basic structure of an essay. So I'm going to cover just very briefly components of an academic essay. The information should not be new. It should be kind of old hat to you. I'll discuss briefly some challenges that students face, and then I will kind of give examples of a strong essay framework. And excuse me, I have some visuals included in that just for anybody who's a visual learner. I always think it's helpful. So let's look first at components of an academic essay. So first and foremost, you have the introduction, and within that introductory paragraph, you've got your thesis statement. And so typically, you'll hear your instructor or your professor talk about, in that introduction, in that paragraph, the hook, background information about your topic, and then finally your thesis statement. So whenever they're referencing a hook, that's kind of that intro sentence or two that grabs the reader's attention. And a lot of times you'll hear instructors tell you, like, there's different kinds of hooks. You'll have maybe like an anecdotal story that you'll use, or I know in my own writing I've used like quotes, or I've used shocking statistics, something that just kind of grabs the reader and hooks them into wanting to read more about your topic. The background information portion of your introduction, you're not really going into detail here, right? Because you want to leave kind of the meat and potatoes for the middle in the body. But this is just any contextual information that your reader needs to know in order to understand where you're going to take them in the rest of your essay. And then, as always, that thesis statement, which again, the thesis statement is a statement, just one sentence, and that rounds out your introduction. So it's that last sentence in the introduction. And then, just kind of a fun fact, anytime, because I'm going to send these slides to you, I'm going to email them to you. Anytime you see anything that's underlined, you can click on that. That is a link that will take you. I'm going to pause this video. This link will take you to another YouTube video from an Ally Center tutor. So in this case, I believe this was one, yes, Mariah right here, Mariah Burkert. And so if there's something that you're just kind of wanting more information about, there's a link to, we have so many resources for you, but this is a link in particular to thesis statement constructions. We have multiple videos on thesis statements. You can pick which one resonates with you best, and watch that if you need or have questions about thesis statements. Okay, why is my computer not responding? I might have to stop my share for a second. I think it froze up. Yep. Okay. Back to sharing. Here we go. All right. So that is the introduction and the thesis statement component of an academic essay. The next component is the body paragraphs. And so the body paragraphs, no matter how many there are, okay, if we're doing like a standard 5 paragraph essay, you would have 3 body paragraphs. But for the classes that you're taking, you're probably going to have more than 3 body paragraphs. But within each of those, you will have a topic sentence, and that's the first sentence that tells you exactly, or tells the reader exactly what the paragraph is going to be about, right? What's the main point of this paragraph? And then that will be followed up with evidence and supporting details. Again, that's underlined. So that's a link to another YouTube video from one of our Ally Center tutors that discusses evidence and supporting details. And then you'll wrap up your body paragraphs with some sort of analysis or concluding sentence. So again, this should all be stuff that you have done, read about, or heard about at this point from instructors. And then the third component of your academic essay would be your conclusion. And so your conclusion, the first thing you'll do is you will restate your thesis statement. Obviously, you'll use different words. You don't want to just regurgitate the same exact sentence from the introduction. But typically, the rest of your conclusion is going to leave your reader, I call it the now what, or the so what. And this is kind of a call to action. So instead of just summarizing what you've written about, you want to leave your reader with something that they can take and then do something with. And so that's where kind of like the so what, like, why is this important? What do you want me to do with this information? And that kind of rounds out that structural framework of an academic essay. So once we know that, okay, I've got some visuals for you. If this helps, this is a visual that I've used many times throughout the years with not only high school students, but also college students. This is kind of the 3 main parts of the essay: the intro, the body, and the conclusion. And then each of these each of these arrows is broken down further if you look at the rectangles, okay? The purpose of the introduction, you'll see in the body, right? You've got that wash, rinse, repeat in terms of the body paragraphs. You're kind of doing the same thing in each body paragraph. And then your conclusion, right? It restates that thesis. Again, here, this visual tells you to summarize your argument. That kind of goes against what I just said. I do not like to summarize the argument in the conclusion. As always, defer to your instructor. Here's another visual that might help you. It's called the 5 paragraph hamburger essay. I like this one. So that top bun and the bottom bun, right? That's your introduction and your conclusion. And then the body, okay, is the lettuce, the tomatoes, the meat itself, right? It's the first point paragraph, the second point paragraph, the third point paragraph, sandwiched in between those buns. And then here's another visual. Now, I know that you will be just stunned and impressed by this beautiful artwork. I did this in Microsoft Word. But I used to use this graphic with my high school students. It's kind of, you've got your introduction, if you picture it as an upside down triangle. The top of the triangle is the broad information. And as you work your way through your introduction, you get down to your main point, which is your thesis statement. And then your body paragraphs are represented by these rectangles, right? And then your conclusion is an inverted introduction. So instead of ending with your main point and your conclusion, you start with that main point, which is a restatement of the thesis. And then you kind of work your way to more general comments as you round out your essay. So I don't know, you may or may not have seen visuals like that throughout your time as a student, but I like to share them because, you know, we are visual learners by and large. Okay, so let's talk about some common challenges that students face. You may have faced these yourselves, you may not, but it's worth mentioning. The first is getting started. Again, here's a link to a really great video that covers how to get started, right? Writing that essay from beginning to end. And it's helpful, if I think. So I encourage you to take a look at it if you encounter that trouble getting started. Another common challenge that students face is organizing ideas. And this is where the outline comes in so very handy for you, because it just helps you know, okay, here's my main ideas, here's where I'm going to write about those ideas, and it gives you that framework to get started in the actual writing process. And then a third challenge that students face is just keeping track of their sources. And that's kind of where this annotated bibliography comes into play. It helps you not only keep track of which sources you may potentially use, but also gives you that annotated portion that is a reminder of why did I want to use this source in the first place, right? If you keep track of that as you're gathering sources, it will be helpful to you in the end. Okay, all right. So let's look at some strong essay frameworks. And again, this is kind of the idea of outlining, right? This is what an outline should look like. So if I'm looking at, this is a hypothetical essay. If I'm looking at a strong essay framework, that starts by creating a strong outline. And so the first thing I want to do in my outline is devote sections to each paragraph. And so if I'm thinking in my brain just that basic standard 5-paragraph essay, then I will have my first section, which is designated here as A, as my introduction. And then I want to include my thesis in my outline because that puts it front and center for me to use as a guide as I'm planning the body. If I know what my thesis statement is right off the bat, then I can ensure that each of my body paragraphs does not veer off topic. So section B would be my first body paragraph, and then section C would be the next, D the next, and then so on. If you had more than 3 body paragraphs, you would just continue on lettering each body paragraph with, in alphabetical order. And then you would finish with your conclusion. So this particular outline, if you look at the thesis, it's an argument essay. So the obesity epidemic needs a government intervention because these reasons. And then I go on in the body of my essay. In that first body paragraph, I'm going to address the first claim that I mentioned in my thesis statement, which in this case is that medical costs lead to higher taxes for all. And then my evidence is going to focus on the costs of obesity information. The source I'm going to use is my Frank source. Okay, it's from 2013. I'm specifically going to reference page 1951. And then I'm going to leave space in my outline to fill in my analysis. Okay, so here's my claim. Here's the information or the evidence I'm going to use. And then here's my analysis of that evidence and whether or not it supports my claim. And then again, I'm going to do the same thing for each subsequent body paragraph. So the next paragraph is going to focus on my second claim from my thesis. And remember, we want to list these claims in the same order that we have listed them in our thesis, because that helps the reader follow our line of reasoning. It helps our essay be organized. It helps the flow of ideas logically, right? We're not jumping all around. We are just following the path, right, that we have set forth in that thesis statement. So again, creating effective outlines. Here is another workshop that I've linked for you that goes into a little bit more detail, technical detail from one of our Ally Center tutors, Mariah Burkert, who also teaches LAN 100 and maybe even LAN 101. And so she approaches creating these outlines from kind of a different perspective because she is intimately familiar with the assignments. So if you want more information than I'm going into, this would be a great link for you to follow. She goes very much into detail. Okay, so let's talk about why outline, right? Sometimes it can seem like drudgery or a drag, but I am here to say if you put in the bulk of your work at the beginning in the outlining and the annotating your bibliography phase, it is going to make the writing of your essay light years easier. So, purpose and benefits of outlining, right? It allows you to see which of your arguments is going to work before you get into that laborious writing stage. And let me tell you, if you can see before you write that an argument or a claim isn't going to work, you are going to save yourself time and trouble. I promise. Okay. Ask me how I know. Um, Also, outlining shows you where gaps exist in your argument, again, before you get into the writing. And then it just is going to serve as a framework for your essay. I like to refer to an outline as your roadmap, um, kind of like that skeleton, right? You see the skeletal organization of your essay before you start putting the muscles and the organs in and doing all the hard work of creating the essay itself. Now, as far as outlines are concerned, there are different kinds of outlines. And so you might have an alphanumeric outline in that example that I just showed you, which we will come back to. That's an example of alphanumeric. It's got the A's. Sometimes the sub points will be numbered, like Roman numeral 1, and then A, and then 1, and then little a. I mean, it goes into great detail at points. You might see a bullet point or an informal outline. I know in FAS 100, they use more of this informal outline format. LAN 100 and LAN 101, they kind of, depending on the professor, will use more of an alphanumeric outlining format, but you may see either one. And then sentence outlines. So sentence outlines can kind of be a combination of alphanumeric and bullet point, in that they include full sentences for the content of the outline as opposed to just keywords or phrases. So again, I would defer to your professor. You might see a combination of types of outlines depending on which class you're taking. Your professor may just say, create an outline and leave it at that and kind of give you some freedom and flexibility in what you include. So just defer to your professor, look at the assignment guidelines when you're trying to decide the type of outline that's appropriate for you to use. Now, I kind of just said this, but LAN 100 is going to use a topic outline. It's going to be less specific. It's going to focus on like, what's my topic, and then what's my main point in each body paragraph, and then kind of leave it at that. LAN 101 uses a bullet point / informal type outline. So it's not cut and dry, but that's the overall style of outline that each of those courses uses. Now, as far as outlining, if I had to walk you through kind of a step-by-step overview, the first thing you want to do when you're creating an outline is develop a working thesis. We'll look at this again in an outline example, but if you have that thesis front and center, it really, really, really helps you organize the body paragraphs and make sure that you're staying on topic. If you've got it, and here's my topic, here's the 3 main points I'm making. If you've got those in front of you, it's just going to benefit you as you outline the rest of your essay. Once you've developed that working thesis, again, organizing those main ideas, it's just like puzzle pieces. They just kind of fall into place, okay? And they fall into the right order. And you can kind of get an overall glimpse of the body of your essay if you organize those main ideas based on what you've written in that working thesis. And I say working, by the way, because your thesis statement is organic and it is not, I jokingly tell my students, like, when you write that thesis, you are not God. These are not carved into stone forever and ever, amen, okay? That thesis statement can be changed. And a lot of times, this is kind of a secret, not really, but a lot of times it's easier to change your thesis statement than it is to go rewrite the whole body of your essay. And I don't know about you, but I know I've written plenty of essays where I get into the body and I realize that I said I was going this way in my thesis, but I'm kind of going this way in my main points. A lot easier to revise that one statement than it is to revise 3, 4, or 5 paragraphs once you get into the writing. And by developing the working thesis and organizing those main ideas on your outline, that will hopefully prevent you from having to do that at any point. And then the next or third step in outlining would be to include that supporting evidence that you're going to use. That's where you pull in information from the sources. And then identify transitions. How am I going to transition from one idea to the next? You can kind of outline that and give yourself an idea of how to do that before you get started. So going back to that outline we looked at earlier, okay, as a structural framework for your essay, you'll notice, right, here's my thesis statement front and center, right here for me to see, and I can then plug and play, right? My first body paragraph is going to address the first claim I've made in my thesis. Second body paragraph is going to address the second claim, and so on and so forth. Okay, I'm getting an overall kind of bird's eye view of the structure of my essay, and that's the beauty of creating an outline, is that it lets you do this before you write. You can take this structure and use it as a template for your Land 101 argument essay. So if I had to do that, I would start out with my introduction, and then I would even go further than my example here. I would include, what hook am I going to use? Okay, how am I going to catch my reader's attention? Argument essays are a wonderful place for you to use shocking facts or statistics and/or anecdotal stories to grab your reader's attention. And then go ahead, right? What is my background info that I need to provide in order for my reader to understand why my opinion matters on this? And then what is my thesis statement? Okay. And then based on that thesis statement, again, I advise having that first. You can start adding in to your outline. Okay, here's my first claim that I mentioned in my thesis. Here's the evidence I'm going to use, including maybe the author of the source. Okay, what year, what page number, what's my analysis? Jot this all down. Sentences, phrases, right? It doesn't have to be complete sentence information on this outline. But if you know an idea of where you're going, it's going to make the writing of your essay so much easier. Now, I'm going to send this out to you once this workshop is done. It will probably be tomorrow, but you will have this as a document that you can, again, just use as a template to help you as you write your Land 101 argument essay. Okay, so taking that sample that we're working with here, here's an example of how I could turn a topic and outline it very quickly. Okay, so here's my argument outline on the left. Okay, my topic is the value of work-life blending in today's society. Okay, so my introduction, I'm going to start with a hook, an anecdotal story that talks about how I don't have time for it all. And then the background info that I'm going to give is the idea that many people are drowning in busyness of life. And then because of technology, busyness doesn't just have to be confined to a workplace, and work is finding itself at home more than ever because of this technology. And then I'm going to transition into my thesis statement. While many advocate for this life change called work-life blending, the value of such an integration is lost when family life and mental health take the toll. Okay, so that's my thesis statement. Now, I'm just going to give you the outline for the first body paragraph just for time and space sake here. But in my first body paragraph, I'm going to address the first claim that I made, which is that work-life blending is seen as an opportunity to balance work and personal goals, but it actually takes away from family life and negatively impacts relationships. The evidence I'm going to use for that is when I'm at work, I'm worrying about my daughters, and when I'm with them on the weekends, I'm online taking care of loose ends at work. Okay, this is a direct quote from a source that I have whose author's name is Friedman. And then my analysis that I'm going to include here is perfect example of work-life blending taking away from relationships. The blending approach loses value because it takes away from the two things that it is trying to balance, work and personal life. Okay, and then this is how I'm going to fill out this outline for my essay. And you can see here, this is a lot of information. I am doing the bulk of my writing efforts as I outline my argument, and then eventually I will turn this into paragraph form, and I'll add ideas here and there to make sure that, you know, my paragraphs are the appropriate length and that I include all the information. But if I do my hard work here in my outline, my essay writing is going to be a cinch, okay? Now we can do the same thing for Land 100. So Land 100, they write, or you write, an expository essay. And so in an expository essay, I can follow kind of the same standard idea, but it's more of a general bullet point format. So my first paragraph is my introduction. I'm going to include my hook, my background info, and my handy dandy thesis statement. And then my second paragraph, okay, it's the first paragraph in the body. I'm going to use and talk about that first major idea from the thesis, okay? So what's my topic sentence? What are my supporting sentences? That's going to pull in evidence from my sources. And then my concluding sentence. That's the same idea of that analysis that I'm going to give if I were writing an argument essay. In my concluding sentence, I'll transition into the next idea, which then leads me into the next paragraph where I talk about the second major idea from my thesis. And then I just continue on in the same format. I'm washing, rinsing, and repeating the same structure of paragraphs, but each paragraph addresses another main idea from my thesis statement. So if I put these, or this Land 100 sample essay on the left, here's how I could outline a topic on the right, okay? So my first paragraph, okay? My hook is an anecdotal story about a student conducting research and writing an entire essay while wearing pajamas. And then my background information, okay? Technology has given students 24-hour access to course materials, enabling them to incorporate the pursuit of a degree into their busy lives. And then my thesis statement, okay? My topic here is online education. Online education provides accessible and flexible learning opportunities, utilizing digital platforms for course delivery and student-teacher interaction, okay? Again, my second paragraph, I'm going to focus on that first major idea from my thesis statement, okay? The accessibility of online education makes it appealing. My supporting sentences are going to include ideas, right? Work can be completed anywhere, anytime. These ideas support what I've said in my topic sentence. I'm not going to go through every main point there in my supporting sentences, but we then segue into our concluding sentence. It's easier than ever to obtain an education, no matter where or when a student is able. And again, you can see that I've done the bulk of my work in this outline, thus making my writing less labor intensive. We'll pay attention to spelling, grammar, and punctuation when we get to the writing stage, and we have that bandwidth, that mental bandwidth is freed up to do that because we've done the hard work in the outlining portion. All right, so again, coming soon to an email near you, I will have the template for both outlines for both types of essay, okay? If you are taking Land 101 currently, that means you're writing an argument essay this class. If you're doing Land 100, that is an expository essay. If you're in FAS 100, you can use either one of these. Probably the Land 100 outline is more relevant to the FAS 100 students because you are writing your faith and learning paper during FAS 100. So look for those. I'll send those out probably tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to take a drink of water, and then we are going to talk about annotated bibliographies. And then I will I'll have time at the end for you to ask questions. Rosanna, do you have any questions just off the top of your head about outlines, since it's just you and I here? I'll give you a chance to ask them.
Not really. I'm a little stressed about because I know I have an 8-page essay coming up.
Yeah.
That kind of stresses me out a little bit. I'm like, how am I going to make this 8 pages? I mean, I have a really good topic. My topic's going to be should or should not. I haven't really still on the fence on which way I want to go with this. About the what I call like the lost books of the Bible, like the books of the Bible that were not included and why.
Yeah,
so I mean,
the apocryphal texts.
Exactly. And so I have that width there, but it's, I don't know if I can talk 8 pages about it.
Right. Well, and so you'll use the argument outline template for that essay.
Right.
And it's funny too, like that kind of goes right into what I'm saying about the outline. Like if you do the bulk of or put in the bulk of your efforts on your outline, you'll be amazed how much information you're like, oh my gosh, I could fill in 50 pages talking about this.
Right.
So, that's kind of that's the beauty of outlining is that it really does let you see ahead of time how you're going to fill those 8 pages. So, um, I look forward to hearing about that. That's an interesting topic.
Yeah, and I've got about 10 resources right now that I've just, kind of dug around into and kind of looked up and glanced
Yeah.
at. Hadn't really dug deep, but and so
Yeah.
I mean, I have the material there. I mean, the material's there. It's
Yeah.
just getting it to make sense.
Yes, yes, and filtering through it and kind of paring it down into a manageable amount of sources. I'm sure that's a
Yeah.
struggle. All right, well, let's go on and talk about the second portion. Kind of, they go together, right? The annotated bibliography and outlining is like peanut butter and jelly, okay, or whatever, staplers and a staple, okay? They go together well. Peas and carrots. So let's take a look. I'm sure you're familiar with bibliographies. A bibliography is just a list of sources, alphabetical. It includes just bibliographic information. So the author, the title, the date, the publisher, etc. An annotated bibliography is that same list of sources, right, with the bibliographic information, plus a summary, usually a paragraph. Um, and the summary, it also will include sometimes an evaluation of that particular source that you have um, entered into your bibliography. So it's kind of like your source material plus a paragraph that summarizes and evaluates and kind of tells some information about that source. Okay, but what is the point? I hear this all the time from students. Why do I have to do an annotated bibliography? I don't like, why? What's the point? Okay, the annotated bibliography is really more for you than anything else. It helps you learn about your topic and it helps you get an idea, first of all, is this source going to be helpful for me? Because I don't know, again, don't know about you, but I have done so many research papers where I get into the research and think that I'm going to use a source, and then I realize too late that it's really not helpful for me. So the annotation part kind of gives you a heads up, right? It helps you understand, is this source relevant? How am I going to use it? And then that's beneficial to you as you move forward. Um, Annotated bibliographies, they also help other researchers. So there are, you know, granted in this situation or context, kind of probably the only person that's going to read your essay is your professor. But someday you may be at a point where you are writing and researching, and maybe it's published in some form or fashion. Having that annotated bibliography gives other researchers a chance who are researching the same thing as you to look at that particular source. And it's kind of like an abstract. I equate it to an abstract in like a scholarly article. They look at it and they might go, oh, that might be helpful for me in my research. And they can then go find it and use it themselves. Abstracts and scholarly articles are like the summaries. Here's what, here's the topic of the study, here's the results, here's our findings, that sort of thing. So formats between a bibliography and the annotation, okay? The format of an annotated bibliography there's two components, okay? The first component is that bibliographic information that we talked about, okay? The title, author, publisher, etc. The second component of an annotated bibliography is the annotation, and that is done in paragraph form. So you've got like the typical works cited entry with the hanging indent and author's last name and then first name. And then below it, you'll have an additional paragraph that pertains to that source that tells you some things about it. So annotations, they may do one of three things or all of these things. It just, again, depends on the instructor and what they're asking for. Typically, annotations will either summarize, okay, they'll summarize the source. What are the main arguments? What's the point? What topics are covered? They may evaluate the source. So is this source useful? Is it reliable? Is it biased or objective? What's the goal, right? What's the whole goal of me using this source? Annotations may also reflect. So they may mention, is this source helpful to my research? How does this source help shape my argument? Has this source changed my thinking? So again, you may see one or all of these components being asked of you to include in your annotated bibliography. So this is an example of an annotated bibliography, and it's not necessarily the annotated bibliography. It's showing you more the format of it. So you'll notice at the very top, you've got the source, which is by Suzanne Holland. Okay. It's the Human Embryonic Stem Cell Debate, Science, Ethics, and Public Policy, Boston, MIT. It was published in 2025. Okay. This is the annotation. This is why I say it's just showing you the format. Okay. You've got the bibliographic entry up top, and then below it, you've got the paragraph. Okay. Again, if you were really writing an annotation for this, it would have a summary of what this book says about the topic. And then after the summary, it will evaluate it. Is this a reliable current source? Is it biased or objective? Who's the author? Is it relevant to what I'm doing? Annotations, again, they can either describe a source, summarize it, evaluate it, analyze it, a mix of all of them. It just, again, depends. Okay. The one thing your annotation will not do is restate or quote information from the source. Okay. The annotation is really there for you to evaluate, summarize, and analyze the information. Is it relevant to me? Should I use it? Now, I love how this sample tells us, and this is worth mentioning, that the length of your annotation will depend on the assignment, and it will depend on your instructor's instructions. So sometimes instructors will say a 3-paragraph annotation. Sometimes they'll say 2 sentences. I mean, you just really have to defer to the assignment instructions. Another thing worth mentioning here is that, right, here's our second source entry. Not all annotations have to be the same length. So, right, this source is a short scholarly article. It may take a sentence or 2, and that's it to summarize. So even if you're using a book, you really just want to focus on the sections that pertain to your topic. And then, as always, right, a variety of sources is helpful to use. Your annotation will differ depending on the type of source you're using. All right, moving on here. Here are some samples. I'm going to enter this full screen. Annotated bibliography samples. We'll look at this in a minute and kind of craft an annotated bibliography entry together. But if I'm looking here, this is the source. Okay, it's by Max Porter. Grief is the Thing with Feathers, Gray Wolf Press, 2015. So you'll notice this is a 1-line works cited entry. So we do not have a hanging indent. But then our annotation is indented 1 inch from the border, the margin. Thank you, brain. 1 inch from the margin of where our works cited entry begins. So it is indented even more. That amount of indentation here will vary depending on what style of writing you're being asked to use. MLA format indents it an additional inch. So you can see here this annotation is kind of a couple paragraphs. Again, defer to your professor. It's what I always say. All right. Let me go back to my slides here. Okay. So we're going to take a look at a sample source together. Okay. We're not going to read the whole thing, but I just wanted to show you. This is from Gale in Context. It's a database called Opposing Viewpoints. And using that topic of that I showed you from the sample outline of like the merits or the value of online education. I pulled up this source. It's called Getting in Line for Online Education. Here's the author, the date, all the information we need. Okay. So I'm just going to look at like this first paragraph with you and then show you how we would create an entry on an annotated bibliography using the information from this article. So it says, according to a new report from Blackboard Incorporated and Project Tomorrow, a nonprofit organization dedicated to preparing students to become tomorrow's leaders, Learning in the 21st Century 2010 Trends Update, 27% of high school students and 21% of middle school students took at least one class online in 2009, nearly doubling the 2008 numbers of 14% and 16%, respectively. But the report documents that this still falls short of meeting student demand, since the majority of high school and middle school students see the availability of online courses as part of an ideal education experience. And then it goes on to talk about the value of online education. It's not just peripheral anymore. More and more students are gravitating to it, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, issues pertaining to online education. And then it kind of has a link. Here's a link to visit the full report by Blackboard and Education for Tomorrow, I think is the name of the other organization. So using that as our sample, we're going to look at how we could turn that into an annotated bibliography entry. So the first thing we would do is we would include the works cited information. And the beauty of these databases, if you didn't know this, most of them have a citation generator that you can click and then choose your format. In your case, it would be MLA version 9 or whatever, 9th edition. And then you can just copy and paste that onto your works cited page. So that's what we've done here. We've got all the information that's required for a works cited entry, including the hanging indent. And then the next thing we're going to do is write our annotation. So you'll notice, okay, here's my entry. Because it's got a hanging indent, which the hanging indents in MLA formatting are going to be a 1/2 inch, okay? Our annotation is then going to start a 1/2 inch in, an additional 1/2 inch, okay? So our annotation starts a full inch from the margins. That's important to note. And so here's what I wrote. And I wrote this quickly just to kind of give an example of an annotation. But I wrote, in this article, the author discusses a report from Blackboard Inc. and Project Tomorrow regarding the increasing demand for online education opportunities for high school students. He includes statistics that support the idea that to accommodate this growing population, it's imperative that students be given online class experiences prior to attending college, where online classes are common. He presents 2 issues that stand as obstacles for online high school learning experiences: preparedness and policy. This source would be useful to my research because it supports the idea that online education is a benefit and increasing trend among schools and students. The author presents the information objectively and gives clear facts that support his perspective. Because I support online education as a method to take classes, this source will serve as evidence that lends credibility to my argument. So you can see in that paragraph, I've included a short summary of the source, and then I talk about his perspective, right? He presents 2 issues that stand as obstacles. I talk about how and why it would be useful to my research, okay? And I give specifics. He presents the information objectively, gives clear facts. Because I support online education, this source will be beneficial in this way. It will lend credibility to my argument. Those are the 2 components of an annotated bibliography, okay? I would then go in and do the same exact thing for each additional source I'm going to use to support my claims in my essay. One thing to keep in mind with annotated bibliographies is they still do need to be in alphabetical order, just like a regular bibliography. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. I always tell my students to list all their sources alphabetically first, and then go in and type the annotation after each bibliographic entry. Now, there are some mistakes that we make in annotated bibliographies. We're going to talk about how to avoid these common mistakes. And I guess I should say these aren't just for the bibliography. These are avoiding common mistakes in this whole realm of outlines and annotated bibliographies. The first common mistake is a weak thesis. So you want to remember, depending on the type of essay that you're writing, you'll have certain things you want to make sure that you're including to make your thesis statement strong. So for an expository thesis, you want to make sure you've mentioned your topic, your main focus, your purpose, and key points, okay? So if I'm writing about the effects of social media and I'm writing an expository essay, here's an example strong thesis. Social media, that's my topic, affects teenagers, that's my main focus, by influencing their communication skills, mental health, and self-image. So my purpose here is not to argue a point. I'm just telling you these are the ways in which social media affects teenagers. Okay. And I've been specific. Here's the key points I'm going to identify in the body of my essay. If I'm writing an argumentative thesis, I want to include the topic, my claim or claims, and why I feel this way. So again, here's my argumentative thesis. School uniforms should be required in public schools because they reduce bullying, improve focus, and promote equality. Okay. Have a strong thesis that will help eliminate these common mistakes that students make. You want to avoid a disorganized outline, and that's why I always promote starting with a strong thesis statement first. Again, if you know the main points you want to make, that's going to help you stay organized in the body of your essay as you're outlining everything before you start that writing. You want to make sure that you're using a clear structure in your outline. So intro, body, okay, and then conclusion. Follow a logical order. I'm a creature of habit, so I tend to do like chronological, right? So I will start with like first, next, finally, because I just think it adds organization and structure and like a logical flow. And I don't know, that's just how my brain works. You could do a cause and effect type order depending on the type of topic you're writing. If you're doing an argument essay, you could start with the most important claim and then end with the least important claim, right? Any way that you can add an order to your argument or your writing is going to be helpful for the reader. You want to limit each section, and what I mean by that is break larger ideas down into smaller sections rather than having a 3-page paragraph because it's all on the same idea. Maybe break it down, right? Here's your main argument, and then you've got like these subplots or subpoints that you want to make that still pertain to that main point. Break it down, right? Break it up. And then when you're writing your outline, use clear labels, whether it's numbering, Roman numerals, bullet points, letters, whatever the case may be. Okay, use clear labels. And this is kind of the beauty and the benefit of writing an outline, remove any ideas that don't support that thesis statement. That's why it's helpful to have it up there for you to see. Okay, if it doesn't support it, take it out. That will help you avoid getting off topic. Another common mistake students make is they choose sources that they're not credible, okay? If you click on this link right here, and I am going to click on this one because it takes you to the LibGuides that we have from the Ally Center. And this is a whole entire webpage that the library has put together about evaluating sources. And it's going to talk how to evaluate resources and ensure they're valid, how to search the library database. The library database is going to have credible sources on there. How to evaluate kind of these outside of the library sources using what we call the CRAP test, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Scholarly versus popular sources, okay? The benefits of each, where and when you might use one over the other. But this link is there's so much good information on this page for you regarding credible sources. Now, I referenced briefly the CRAP test. Okay. That's obviously an acronym, but it's a way for you to evaluate quickly. Is this source credible? Should I even entertain the thought of using it? Is the source current? Is it within the past like 3 to 5 years? Is it relevant to my topic? Is it authoritative? Right? Is it written by someone who knows what they're talking about, an expert, or is it written by like Jim Bob, who just is interested in the topic and has an online blog? Is it accurate? Okay. Is the information in the source correct? You wouldn't believe how many things on the internet are like not accurate at all. And then is it purposeful? Does it support what I'm trying to do here? Or is it just kind of, am I trying to fill a slot on my works cited page? So choosing credible sources, it is important. All right, so I want to take time for a Q&A. I know, Rosanna, you kind of asked some questions earlier, so I'll do that same thing now for the annotated bibliography portion.
I specifically, I mean, I think I'm pretty good on that. Like I said, I've kind of already got mine put together for the most part. So
yeah,
that is our lesson due this week too. So, but
good. Yeah, good. Well, and like I said, if you've done a bibliography, I mean, like the annotation portion is kind of easy and it's really, you're already doing it mentally as you go through sources to see if they're, useful. This is just kind of forcing you to put it down on paper. So I always tell students, like, you're already kind of mentally annotating it already. So this is just, doing the work of putting it on paper.
I will say that it does help. It helps greatly.
Yeah, it really does. And it really, it just helps you make sense of the sources. It helps you keep track of the sources you found. And I don't know, you might think something's useful and then you come upon another one and you're like, oh, this is better. And then, you don't waste time kind of browsing through something that you're not going to use. Okay. So I've got some key takeaways here from what we've talked about tonight. First, outlines and annotated bibliographies, they work together, right? They're, one's not better than the other. They're kind of like this beautiful marriage of work that you'll do. And they really do help create that clear framework for writing and integrating those sources. Doing an outline, doing an annotated bibliography, they're intended to really bring clarity to your research and to your writing. And I know I've said it a million times, but if you put in that hard work of doing the outline and the annotated bibliography at the beginning, it truly does make the writing of the essay itself just easier. And then again, the last kind of key takeaway is that the content of both the outline and the annotated bib, it may vary depending on your professor or depending on your topic or the type of essay you're writing. So it's not just like a black and white, here's what it'll look like, okay? It may contain one or all of the components we've talked about. So defer to your professor. Okay, as always, I like to finish up my sessions by just sharing additional resources for you because I am employed by the Ally Writing Center. Here are links, academic mentoring, that's one thing we offer. Writing services, obviously. The Ally Center offers accessibility services and ESL services. I have included links to each of those here, if any of that floats your boat or if you need it. We here at the Ally Center love helping students. We have recently launched a podcast and an Instagram page, and we are just having so much fun just sharing what we know and love and care about with you guys. So those are all there for you. Like I said earlier, I will send out not only this presentation, but also those templates for the outlines tomorrow to you. If you are present or if you registered for this workshop, you will receive those in an email. And as always, I just want to thank you for coming. I want to thank you for attending and listening to me. It is my honor to be here with you and help you and serve you in this way. So go take your mess and make it a masterpiece by creating an outline and an annotated bibliography that work for you. So I thank you for joining me tonight and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You are very welcome. I'm going to stop this recording before I forget. Stop.